Larry, this is it's great to see you. I mean, we spoke many moons ago over a couple of hot button topics, but you just said there that you've got a 2-year-old. And you said it, a big 2-year-old. I remember in one of our interviews, you actually said you were a big 10-pound baby yourself.
Yeah. He almost beat me in that respect. He was 9 pounds 2 ounces. Yeah.
Have you got
Yeah.
any? I mean, you're obviously not going to choose a path for him, but I mean, one of the questions I'll always ask is, do you want your children to go into boxing?
I'd want him to do. I'd want him to do boxing training. Obviously, self defense, confidence and stuff like that. But I wouldn't push him into uh, boxing as a career. I mean, obviously, if he wanted to do it, that's fine that he wants to do it, but I wouldn't push him in that direction. We all know how the sport is. And to be honest, if he wanted to do it as a sport, then obviously amateur boxing is where it's at. If you want it purely as a sport, we all know professional boxing is more of a business than a sport. So yeah, I wouldn't push him in that direction, but if he wanted to do it, then fine.
As I see Gabe Montoya tweeting today, what was it? Clean sport, dirty business. Talking about boxing. By
I,
the way, obviously, in terms of your own sporting background, you were obviously a sprinter. How did that come about? Was that the path that you chose yourself, or was that a path selected for you?
no, it was a path that I chose myself. I was always quick as a child. I remember being in primary school as a second year. So I think I must have been about 8, and I beat one of the fourth year students, the fastest guy in the school, which he was 10 at the time, and yeah. So I've always been quick. My uncle, who used to be part of the Nigerian Olympic Committee, he was a sprint long jumper. He competed in the 72 or 76 Olympics for Nigeria. So he's always someone that I looked up to in that respect, and wanted to emulate him.
So, you were initially doing the 400 meters, right? Is that right? Or, like
Yeah,
when you started doing it properly?
yeah. No, I started training properly as a sprinter. I think after my third year in secondary school, so when I was 14, because I was winning all the sports days. I think that sports day I won the 400 meters, and then it was like 10 minutes later they did the 100 meters, and I won that as well. So yeah, and they all pushed, the teachers were all like, yeah, you should go and train. So I went to Haringey. Was it New River Sports Center?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, where they had the track. So I went there for a bit, trained there, but I couldn't really afford the journey at that time, all the time. So obviously being 14, and my parents weren't doing great. So I found a track nearer to home, being the Mile End Stadium. So that was just a couple of stops from Hackney. So yeah, just started training there, and yeah, went from 400 meters, and then obviously as I got older and bigger,
Yeah.
it was like, yeah, I think the 100 and 200 would be more my speed. So I concentrated on those two instead of the 400. Although I was a really good 400-meter runner, but I won't say I was sad when I switched to 100 and 200.
Yeah, because in athletics, like the 400 is known as the one that really hurts, isn't it?
Yeah, what was the term they used for it? Is it the man killer, or yeah, something like that? Yeah. That's the term. Yeah, something along those lines. They that's the nickname for that event. Although I would say, as hard an event that is, 400 hurdles is slightly harder, obviously,
Yeah, yeah.
for obvious reasons. You're not only doing the 400, but then you got hurdles in front of you as well. Which I did. I actually attempted that at one point, but I was like, yeah, that's not for me.
Especially as you got bigger. So
Yeah,
you did a, what is it, a 10-700, is that right?
Yeah, I ran 10.7 for 100 meters, and I think I did 21. Is it 21.9 or 21.8 for 200? Yeah, I think it was 21.9, 21.9. Yeah.
So were your did you have heroes? Were the people that you looked up to, were they athletes, as in athletic
Yeah.
track stars, or did you look at other sports as well?
Well, yeah, it was obviously Linford Christie at the time. I looked up to him. I met him actually, and he was really nice, and gave me pointers, and looked up to a few others who are actually friends of mine now. The high jumper Dalton Grant.
Yeah, sure, sure.
He's actually a good friend of mine because not only did he help me as a sprinter, but then I found out later on that he went to school with my taekwondo instructor, and they're very good friends.
Didn't he
So
get silver? He got silver at the Worlds, didn't he? Behind
yeah,
was it behind Patrick Sherberg?
I think either him or the Cuban guy,
Oh,
Sotomayor.
Sotomayor, yes, yeah, yeah, of
Yeah,
course, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it was one of them. Yeah, but yeah, he was fantastic and very helpful guy. I mean, he runs an academy now to help youngsters get into sport, athletics mainly. So yeah, those really were the two guys that I looked up to in terms of British athletes. Then obviously you had the American sprinters and stuff like that. So I looked up to them. Obviously, like I said, my uncle as well. So yeah, I kind of like wanted to pursue that as a career.
I had you pegged as a John Regis fan.
Yeah, no, I did like John Regis actually. I really
Yeah,
did like John Regis. Yeah,
he
yeah,
was
yeah.
a
Yeah.
tank, mate. He was an
Oh,
absolute tank.
I mean, Linford was big, but yeah, I mean, John Regis would not have looked at a place on a rugby field, even a bodybuilding stage. But he had, I think, his family's genetics because Cyril Regis was his
Best
relative,
friend. Yeah,
and
yeah,
he was a lump as well. It just ran in the family.
yeah. Because John
Yeah,
was a great bend runner, wasn't he? They obviously 200, and they stuck him in the odd 400 relay as well, didn't they?
yeah, he had great stamina. Yeah, because he always did the 400 relay as well. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
And then you
yeah.
suffer your sort of dreams or aspirations came crashing down with a torn hamstring, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I tore my hamstring before. I tore my hamstring twice. So the first time I tore it, it took a lot of rehabbing to get it back to where.
Did you tear it in a race
No,
or training?
training.
Yep.
Yeah. So it took me a long time to get it back to where I could be competitive again and train as hard as I could. And then it took a lot of money as well. And then obviously, I mean, the club that I was with at the time helped, but they can only help so much. So, having to go to physios and stuff like that, it cost money. So, the second time when I tore it, I was just like, I'm fed up with this. I don't have the funds to really look after this, and yeah, I'm just fed up basically. So while I was rehabbing it myself, um, yeah, that's when I kind of decided that I was going to pursue boxing. I'd always been doing boxing training off season. You know, you get about 6 to 8 weeks off season after the track season's ended to no training. And so to keep myself in shape, I always went to the boxing gym in first Santa Monica, which closed down, and then Lions Boys Club. So yeah, that's that. I always loved boxing, obviously, and yeah, it's when the second time I tore my hamstring. That's when I decided, yeah, I was gonna pursue boxing.
Because people do say with the hammies, they never quite get right again, do they? You're always sort of at risk, and you've possibly lost a yard of pace after it's happened as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, even to this day, 20 odd years later, I still have a very my left hamstring is still very tight, and I have to make sure that I'm completely warmed up before I attempt to do any sort of like high intensity stuff with my legs regarding the hamstring. So yeah, yeah,
Because anyone who wants to see it go, obviously there's that famous video of Derek Redmond in, what was it, 92, where his hammy goes and he's helped over the line by his dad, which is one of
yeah.
one of the more meaningful clips you will probably find on the internet, really.
Very poignant, very poignant. But I mean, yeah, yeah. It's and the thing is, he was favourite for a medal So that must have, I mean, doubly hard, not just get injured, but knowing that you're a favourite for a medal, and then to take your hamstring like that is, yeah, soul destroying.
And I think he'd been a nearly man for a while, hadn't he? That was his year, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because it's been like that for a lot of the 400-meter runners in Britain. You know, the same happened with David Brindley. The same happened with Roger Black, but obviously he was able to come back in the end and get silver in the Olympics. Same happened with Dwayne Dejo. They reach a peak and then they just fall off. I don't know if it's the event. I mean, training for the event is oh man, I don't even want to think about it. I remember very, very many nights I puked up after a training session.
Yeah. Because for
it,
anyone who doesn't know, it's basically a sprint as far as it's basically a sprint of 45 seconds, isn't it?
yeah,
And you know,
yeah,
if you're very, very good, it's a 45-second sprint. And the worse you are, the more it hurts because the longer you've got to sprint for.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And it's a sprint, but you have to pace yourself at the same time.
Yeah.
So if you don't pace yourself well, you could end up a cropper, basically. Yeah,
You
yeah.
die a very slow death on that last 100.
Yeah, the lactic acid buildup is, yeah, intense.
How good could you have been? Because obviously, well, when we talked before, I know you said about training alongside the likes of Dwayne Chambers and Philip Sado. Um, were you in that class? Like, if you hadn't had injuries, could you have gone? Could you have represented the UK at anything, or would you have been in national competitions?
I'm not so sure because when I was running 10, every time I say to someone I was running 10-7, they're like, wow, wow. But they have to understand that there's levels to this game. When I was running 10-7, Dwayne was running 10-1.
Yeah.
So you know, could I have? You never know. You know, I mean, I was a decent standard. I was, you know, at that point, I was, you know, national standard. But could I have represented the UK? It's hard to say because there were so many guys ahead of me who just had so much more raw talent for sprinting than I did. Um, you know, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, if I was to guess, I'd probably say not because there was just too many guys ahead of me, like Dwayne, who had, you know, just natural talent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we talked a while back, you've already mentioned them. You said about your parents; they gave you a good upbringing. What did they do? Were they around all the way through your childhood?
Yeah, 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 yeah. You know, my parents always made sure that you know, there was always someone in the house, even though my dad worked nights for a lot of our childhood. There was always, I think they did that deliberately to make sure there was always someone in the house, so we weren't roaming the streets like a lot of kids do. And you know, they're Nigerians, so they were strict disciplinarians, as you might know. And being Nigerians as well, old school Nigerians, they enforced education, education, education. So yeah, I mean, listen, in some in to some people and even to me at times it seemed quite dogmatic, but at the end of the day, I think it for the most part, it was the best thing for us as children, and I think my brother and sisters would attest to that as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who do get that tough love, and you know, I had a pretty Victorian upbringing because my dad was so much older. He sort of died in
Mm.
2012, but he was from a different time.
Yeah,
I think you know, a hard way is a good way, but times just change, don't they? And obviously things that might have happened 30, 40 years ago just don't happen now. And
yeah,
attitudes and relationships change as well. Like, you know, I don't know if that's the same um, in your family tree. Obviously, we spoke about your little and now. Not to say that you give your 2-year-old an absolute shoeing, but in terms of my kids are grown up now, and you know, I didn't treat them the same way my dad treated me. Cycles, you know, everything changes, don't they? They do change.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's certain things I wouldn't repeat. I mean, I wouldn't the punishments. I wouldn't be as severe with my one as my parents were with me and my siblings, but for the most part, I agree. I think that's what's missing nowadays with kids. you know, that toughness, that tough love, that, you know, the discipline, knowing that, you know, you're going to get a whack if you
Yeah, I like that.
uh yeah,
Yeah.
if you mess around, you know. And I think, because I said this to the missus actually. I said, like, don't get me wrong. Obviously, I was born here, but my parents are from Nigeria, and Nigeria has a whole heap of problems. I'm not even trying to pretend like Nigeria is a utopia. It's got a whole heap of problems. But one problem they don't have is wayward kids running the streets. Because if that happens, you'll get whacked up at school. The teacher will tell your parents, and then you'll get whacked up at home. And if you mess around on the street, walking around, everyone on the street will whack you up, and then they'll send you to your parents' house, tell them what you were doing, and then they'll whack you up. So, so you know, that part, I wish was over here. But yeah, like you said, the times change. It used to be like that over here. So yeah, but
Yeah, it's funny. The tough love thing is interesting because obviously some kids it will screw up who can't cope with it, but also
yeah,
there's some kids who, for me, I'll say, well, it just taught me right from wrong. A very
mm,
simple and effective way of teaching you right from wrong. And the thing was as well, if you did something, you knew if you deserved it or not. You knew if it was
yeah,
coming or not.
yeah, yeah,
You,
yeah,
and
definitely.
and it was that sort of it was the panic after doing it, wondering if you were going to get caught. So
Yeah, yeah,
anyway, you obviously said about education. So you went to uni. Which uni did you go to?
yeah. I went to Queen Mary. So, and I studied pharmaceutical chemistry, which would serve me well later.
Is it what? So I got asked, why did you go for that qualification?
um, so as I said, my parents pushed for education, education, education. I really didn't want to go to uni at that point. I mean, when I was younger, uni was always on the cards because it was sold to us that that's what you needed to be successful. But obviously, as you get older, you realize that that's not necessarily the case. And I was very academic, and I think so because of that, my parents put a lot of hopes and dreams into me, like being a doctor or a lawyer, whereas that wasn't part of my plan whatsoever. And I really didn't want to go to uni. I really didn't want to go to uni, so I kind of felt forced to go to uni. But so I kind of made a deal where if I go to uni, I'm going to study what I want to study. I'm not going to study medicine. I'm not going to study law. I'm going to do what I want to do. And it kind of became that way because yeah, if truth be told, I would love to have studied drama, which obviously I'm into now. But I kind of compromised and said, look, my favorite subject was science, and out of the sciences, it was chemistry. So I said to them, look, I'm going to study pharmaceutical chemistry. You can get a good job after. And they kind of agreed, and that's how that subject came to be the degree.
So what were you thinking of doing with that qualification? What do you do with that?
Do you know what? I didn't have a plan. I just didn't have a plan. I I didn't know. I didn't know. I just thought I'll get them off my backs by by studying that degree. And yeah, I mean, because to be honest with you, the first year I hated it. I absolutely hated it because it was just oh, tedious bookwork, which I was just tired of. But you know, but by the time I came to uni, I think that was one of the things I was just tired of. Just, you know, I'd done my GCSEs and I'd done my A levels. I managed to get a year out. Um, take a year out, and then came back in, and I didn't have any money as well, so I didn't know what I was going to do with that degree. To be honest with you, I just thought, just get a degree under my belt, and everyone's happy.
So is that what happened? You saw it through. You did the full 3 years. Is that right?
So I did 2 years, and then I ended up in prison.
So did you finish the degree later on? Did you get it, or did you
Yeah,
just do the? Yeah, you did.
yeah. So what happened was, I think 4 years into my sentence, I managed to transfer to an open prison in London. It's closed now, Latchmere House in Richmond. So they allowed me to every day go in and out to finish my degree. So I managed to finish it that way.
So you were trying to sort of pay your way through uni and couldn't get a job, and then
Yeah, yeah,
found your own work.
pretty much. Yeah, yeah. It's not the smartest move by any stretch of the imagination, but yeah, it's something that that happened. But it's funny because I even though it was a stupid thing that I did, I don't regret it because obviously in prison I became a Muslim and still a Muslim today. And for me, that's the greatest blessing that apart from my son that I've had. So
So
yeah.
what did you go down for? And one armed robbery.
So armed robbery, well, robbery and firearms charges. Although I didn't have any firearms, imitation firearms. Yeah, yeah, we were robbing brothels basically in the West End. So yeah,
Wow. So and how long did you get?
got a 10-year sentence.
Wow. Was that first offence?
Yeah.
That's pretty harsh, isn't it? In the current climate, you see all sorts in the news for people who, don't try to be. I'm not going to say Robin Hood, but you know what I mean. It's not like you were tying up. You know, I don't know. There's no nice way of getting out of this now, is there? But
I know what you mean. Don't worry.
yeah, thieves robbing
Yeah,
thieves. Kind of.
yeah. I
Yeah, it's a
mean,
long
look,
time.
yeah, it is, especially for first offence, and apparently they wanted to give me more apparently, but it yeah. um yeah, I remember when I got the sentence, I couldn't believe it. In fact, I was so much in shock that it didn't register until after I went back to the prison because I was on remand for about 10 months. Went back to the prison and then realized, shit, it's 10 years. Like the earliest I can come out of it is after doing 5 years. But at that point, obviously, like I said, I've done about 10 months, 10 and a bit months. Um, so yeah, that is when I came back to the prison that it hit me that wow, I'm gonna be here for quite some time. Um, it didn't register when I actually got the sentence, so that was a little weird.
What what was it? What was it like? What was your prison time like?
um, for me personally, not eventful. I mean, obviously you get the odd one or two people that try it, and you make sure that you let them know that you're not the one. But I didn't really have too much of that, to be honest with you. I pretty much got on with most people. I mean, obviously my size helped, but yeah, I didn't really have many confrontations. I think if I really be honest, I had maybe two confrontations in the whole 5 years that I was there. So yeah,
That's good because also you say your size helps, but also sometimes some people might see it as a target, right? Sometimes we know that there's sometimes a big dude goes into a bar and people want to try him.
yeah,
Hence in
yeah,
prison, right?
yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, that does happen, 100%. But yeah, I mean, it didn't happen with me. So
You said one of the worst things about prison was the hurt it caused for others in your life. I'm guessing you're talking about your parents there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. My mum especially, she wasn't happy with me for obvious reasons, and I can't blame her. Um, you know, it was it was a pretty dark time in my relationship with my parents, especially my mum. Obviously, my dad's not around anymore. He died a few years ago, but yeah, my mum was severely unhappy with me, and I had to take that on the chin, and as you said earlier, I had to own up to it and you know try and make amends as much as possible.
So I was going to say, what did you get out of prison? Because some people double down and become career criminals and learn how to live on the other side of the law. But you knew that wasn't going to be you, and you knew you didn't want to go back. So obviously, I'm guessing religion, and obviously the fact that you then finished out your degree showed you that you were sort of preparing for a very different life when you got out, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't want to be a statistic, and also it's just not. It wasn't the way I was brought up. I mean, obviously, I grew up in Hackney where that happened. I mean, Hackney today is completely different to the Hackney that I grew up in. But obviously, the Hackney that I grew up in was full of people, in gangs and doing all sorts of stuff. That's when a lot of my friends got murdered with a Hackney Tottenham beef, and I never involved myself in that. And actually, funny story. To do with that. When I was in prison, my brother went to a club. I can't remember what club it is, nightclub, and he went with his friends. And someone came up to him, and he was like, "Oh, you're Larry's brother." And my brother didn't know how to take that, so he was like, "Yeah." And then he was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, no, 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 no. How's Larry doing?" And he was like, "Yeah, he's okay." And then he was like, "Okay, look, I'm just letting you know it's about to get messy in there. Basically, something's about to go down." So he said, "You better leave." So my brother didn't need to be told twice. He just got his friends and he said, "Look, something's about to go down. Let's go." So they left, and apparently a few minutes later there was a shooting in the club, and that's why I'm grateful that I'm how can I put this? I've never been. I've always tried to be a good person, especially I've never tried to involve myself in things, just because my friends were involved in it, and a lot of the Hackney Tottenham beef that happened, where like I said, a lot of my friends got killed. I always didn't want to involve myself in that because that had nothing to do with me. I knew the players, and I didn't consider myself a gangster. I considered myself, a capable guy, but I didn't consider myself, a gangster. I need to carry a gun and I need to do this and that. So, and I think for the most part, everyone saw me as that as well. They saw Larry as a capable guy, but he's a nice guy and he just wants to do his thing. And so we're not gonna involve him in stuff. So that I was grateful because obviously my brother is pretty much like my best friend. So that I wouldn't have been. Let's put it this way: I wouldn't have been well in the head if anything happened to my brother. So I'm grateful to Allah for that. But yeah, it's Hackney. Hackney was a strange place back then. It
Well,
really
that was
was.
when it was the old Murder Mile, right?
Yes, yes. In fact, my mum still lives on Murder Mile.
Yeah. Well, I've been
Yeah,
down there subsequently to see your old trainer, James. And, like you said, you can't, there's bits where you can see it's not being redeveloped, but on the whole, it's not as terrifying as you might imagine now.
yeah,
But you can
yeah.
still see, I suppose there's, things that haven't quite come into the 21st century yet down there. By the way, it was quite interesting when we spoke many moons ago because you said how your training in prison depended on the prison, and obviously one of the things was what the food was like in terms of what you're putting into your body, because sometimes the prison slop just didn't match up to what your nutritional values were, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's to say the least. So when I was in, when I started off my sentence, I was in Wandsworth, and the food, I mean, for 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 a holding prison, the food wasn't too bad, but it was okay. It was okay. It's when I went to Swellside and we had a prisoner kitchen. So if you had enough money, you could buy your own meat and stuff and cook your own food. And yeah, that brought on my training a whole lot.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah. So what we used to have was food boats. So there used to be someone who was a really good cook, and then what we'd do is we'd like maybe 3, 4, 5 people would get their money together every week and buy meat and whatever other foodstuffs we wanted, and we'd buy extra for the person who's doing the cooking, so he doesn't have to spend any money. That's like his payment for cooking, and they'll cook a nice meal every night for us. So yeah, that was really really good. And then when after Swellside, I ended up in Stamford Hill, which was the complete opposite. I think I had diarrhea the first month I was there, and I lost like 10 kilos. I looked like Skeletor. Honestly, And then I was trying to, although we weren't allowed to get some supplements, creatine in particular, in there because I lost so much weight, and it was just a nightmare. And then when I went to Latchmere House, the food there was actually really, really good. And then obviously I was in there maybe 2 months before I started going out every day for my to finish my degree. So obviously I could eat food outside. So
And
yeah.
then there was this great line where one of the prisons, they had you had staff shortages, so they cut the gym time of the bigger
Oh,
prisoners.
you've got a fantastic memory, Tris. Yeah, yeah, that was in Swellside. Yes, yes, yes. So
They were like,
I
"No,
think
you're
I was
big enough. You don't need to get out here. Get back inside."
yeah, I mean, at Swellside there was some big guys there, and because I was on a powerlifting team there as well, and if you behaved yourself, you actually got an extra gym session. So all in all, with the powerlifting and the extra gym session, I was getting five gym sessions a week, which was great. And I think most of the other big guys were the same. And then because of the staff shortages, it went down to two, and it was like, what? So yeah, it wasn't great, but obviously I made up for it by just working out in myself. Other guys took their frustrations out on the you know the prison guards. So it
The
wasn't a good
screws in the
time in there.
system. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a great time in there when they cut the gym. Yeah, and it's funny because the guy, like I said, most of the big guys in there were not troublemakers. They all they wanted to do was work out and that's it. So it actually would have served them better to try and facilitate us getting as much gym sessions as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they said they were severely understaffed. So
So you're out of prison. Okay, you've got your degree in pharmaceutical chemistry.
mhm.
How do you go into boxing? Why do you not just think, like, I don't know, is it a physical thing where you want to use your size and strength and you want to scratch that sporting itch? Or like, how do you not look for a 9 to 5 or a desk job with your degree?
So I've always had a dream of being a sportsman. Actually, I've had two dreams: being a sportsman and an actor. So I'm actually doing the second one now.
Right.
But yeah, one of the dreams was to be a sportsman, and as I have that as a career. And like I said to you before, I'd already made that decision before I went to prison that I was going to pursue boxing. So I already made that transition by the time I went to prison. So for me, it was just picking up
Right.
where I left off. Sorry. So yeah, I always made plans. In fact, what the year that I was the last year of my sentence when I was going in and out to finish my degree, I was always liaising with the person who trained me in Lions Boys Club to come back to train there, and they were really happy to have me back because they saw something in me, and my brother was training there at the time as well. But funnily enough, when I actually did get released, they refused to have me back in the club. And that was because the owner of the club said that because I'd been in prison, it wouldn't be a good look to have me in there, which I found very perplexing because I was like, well, you've got kids here that look up to me, who know who I am, and it would be good for them to see me doing something positive. And then on the flip side of things, you've got people who are wayward, and it will be good to have them in there and see me doing stuff, knowing what my background. It was just like talking to a brick wall anyway. So I that's when I left them and ended up in Repton.
So did you have some amateur fights?
Yeah. I had how many? I had 11 amateur fights. Yeah,
Okay. And then
yeah. I had
when
11.
I looked up the other day, I actually covered your pro debut on Ian Naperville in Bethnal Green. So how did you and Frank hook up? Frank Maloney, now Kelly Maloney, because he promoted that show. What was your
Yeah,
introduction with Maloney?
that was all due to James Cook.
Okay.
So how did this occur? So someone obviously I always knew who James was, but someone said that maybe I should go and check out James, to train me as a pro. So I went and spoke to James, and I showed him some of my amateur fights, and he was quite receptive to training me. So then he was like, "Look, we need to find you a manager, promoter, and I've got links to several." So he spoke to a few, and I think Frank Maloney was the one that was the most receptive. Obviously, we know he loved heavyweights, so I had a meeting with him, and ended up signing papers with him. And obviously, I was kind of in awe of him because obviously I was a big Lennox Lewis fan, and obviously he helped guide Lennox, so I thought he might be able to do the same for me,
So let me ask you that. How far did you think you were going to go? Obviously, it's one thing ticking a box to be a sportsman. It's another thing to be the heavyweight champion of the world. Like, what did you think
Yeah.
the ceiling was?
I didn't really. I thought I could be British champion. Definitely, I thought I could be British champion. I didn't know if I could be world champion. And to be honest with you, that wasn't it. That wasn't my primary thought when I became a boxer. I thought to myself, look, if I can make a living out of this, a decent living, that's what it's all about for me. Because I mean, the sport is littered with world champions even that didn't make much money, and consequently their lives after boxing has not been fantastic, to say the least. So I was always conscious of the fact that titles, and legacy doesn't always equate to, monetary rewards.
Sure,
So
sure. You won 4 on the bounce and then ran into a Pole who I can't pronounce, and lost the decision. What was what was your take home after the first 5 fights? Obviously, four quick wins and then a decision loss. What were you thinking? Were you thinking, well, this is okay, like I'm bringing in some regular cash, or that after a few wins, you thinking that British title's in going to be within touching distance?
I thought it was in touching distance because that fifth fight which I lost, I know Daniel Perret, I remember him well. It's actually a Russian. I was moving house around that time, and I should have called that fight off. I really should have called, because even James Cook warned me. Look, you're stretching yourself a bit too thin. You're not taking time off work, and you're not taking time off training, and you're moving house. It could zap your energy. And I was like, nah, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Kind of underestimated the opponent in a sense that I thought, yeah, I could do all of this and still be fine in there. And I mean, I was doing great for the first 2 rounds, and then I came out for the third round. I remember I hit him with a right hand, and he kind of just didn't register it. And I thought, what's this? And I hit him with another one. He just walked through it, and I'm like, that doesn't happen. And I subsequently, during that round, I started breathing so heavy, and I know I'd done my training. So, and then I realized, okay, what James is saying is true, because I literally had nothing left in that third round onwards, and it was just a matter of surviving, not surviving, but because I wasn't in any trouble in there, but just kind of like, yeah, just get through it. And I personally thought I won that fight by a point, because he didn't really hit me with any meaningful shots, but I just weren't as busy as maybe the ref wanted me to be. So,
By
yeah,
the
so
way,
I didn't really.
yeah, no, go on. No, go on.
No, I didn't really take that loss as. I actually wanted a direct rematch with him, but then it was said to me, no, there's no point. Just beat some of the guys that beat him. So then the next fight I had, I think was, or maybe the fight after that, was Scott Belshaw, who lost to the same guy, then beat the guy. And then obviously further down the line, I had a fight with Dave Ferguson, who beat Daniel Perret, and I stopped him in the first round. So You know.
Yeah, so by the way, I think BoxRec, by the way, changed Daniel Perret's name. That's why I didn't recognize it. I think he's probably got a more Russian name on there these days. But now you
Right.
said that, it absolutely rings a lot of bells because he was a regular visitor over here, as you
Yeah.
said. And you won 4 in a row after that, by the way, in good class, which is probably prime Larry, right? Because you beat Dave Ferguson, Colin Kenner, Scott Belshaw, and Paul Butlin. Like those are really good scouts to be taken at that level at that early part of your career.
Yeah, definitely. Especially the Dave Ferguson one, because that was a British title eliminator. No, sorry, that was English title eliminator. Um, I might have, yeah, I did have the Southern area by then as well, because I beat Colin Kenner for the Southern area. And Dave Ferguson never been stopped. And I remember watching him against Rogan on that first prize fighter,
Yeah,
and knowing that he was a tough guy. And then I'd seen fights he had in the amateurs with Chisora and a couple other guys, and I thought, wow, this even James said be ready for a 10 rounder because this guy's never been stopped. But I thought to myself, you know what, I know what I'm capable of power wise, and yeah, I at that point I started going to the wild card to train. So I was pretty confident that that would go my way, you know.
so yeah, so you went out and trained with in the wild card in Los Angeles.
Yeah, yeah,
Were there
yeah.
was there much heavyweight sparring out there? Doesn't strike me as a haven for heavyweights, or were you just getting
It
quality work in?
it wasn't well, it isn't a heavyweight haven now, but back then it was. It was sort of because back then, this is what a lot of people don't realize. I sparred with a just turned pro, Andy Ruiz. I was calling Andy Ruiz possibly upsetting Joshua when no one thought he'd do it. And in fact, my brother's friends made a hell of a lot of money on that fight because I told my brother, this guy's good. I've sparred him. He almost had me on the floor, but you know, in one of the sparring sessions. I remember was just to touch on that. First time I sparred him, Freddie warned me he's got very quick hands. I mean, you've got quick hands, but he's got quick hands. Okay, cool. So I went in there and he hit me with an almighty left hook, and I was seeing stars. And if I didn't grab him, I'd be on the floor. And I just finagled my way around that first round. And I got back to the corner. Freddie was in my corner, and he was like, "Listen, you better show me something this round." That's all he said to me. He didn't say slip the jab, you know, throw more right. He just said, "You better show me something this round." I was like, "Oh my god, I must have looked awful." So I basically came out with a mindset in the second round. I got to knock him out, and I hit him with an almighty like overhand right, and he kind of started seeing stars. He grabbed me for dear life, and it's kind of like in the third round to the sixth round, we had this unspoken agreement that we would just box instead of
keep,
knocking 7 bells out of each other.
keep the rocket launchers away. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we actually became quite good friends after that. We spoke and yeah, there was a few good heavyweights around at that time. There was. I mean, yeah, there was. But yeah, it wouldn't be what I would call a haven for heavyweights. But there was good spot. I mean, there was also some good cruiserweights because Ola Afolabi was at
Yeah,
that
of
gym at that
course. Yeah.
time. And then you had a
Who
lot
was the best you sparred in your career? Was it Andy?
of no, Terry Dunstan.
Oh, okay.
Terry Dunstan, and in fact, I have to credit Terry for teaching me so much about boxing. He was a godsend to me, to be honest. I mean, we're still good friends now, though I haven't spoken to him for a while. But he really took me under his wing and you know taught me a lot. He taught me a lot
Nice.
about sport. Yeah, so I would say he's the. I remember sparring him as an amateur and just dreading every time I had to spar him. I dreaded it. I dreaded it because he just beat me up, and not in a bad way, like not taking liberties or anything, but
Just
he just
can't do
make me look
anything with him.
stupid.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry,
I said you just couldn't do anything with him.
not at all, nothing. He'd nullify everything that I brought to the table, and just yeah. I mean, but then again, Terry'd sparred by that point. He'd sparred Lennox, and apparently he made Lennox look the same. He'd sparred Tyson, Bruno. yeah, he's one of he's I would definitely say he's one of the best British boxers to never win a world title.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Hey, so obviously we're talking about those good wins that you netted, but there was still a big jump up relatively to Big John McDermott. Were you on board with the McDermott fight?
Oh yeah, to this day, I could have beaten McDermott. And that's kind of like where I feel like with James, I didn't really have a good game plan, because, and it's not, I'm not slighting James, I'm just saying how it was. James just kept, I think James was in awe of my power, and he just kept saying, just go in there and knock him out. But I was like, how, James? How am I going to? Because I understand that, McDermott is a good boxer. He's probably a better, well, not probably, he was a better boxer than I was. He'd been doing it since he was a kid. So, my thing is, how am I going to do this? But yeah, I mean, if I'd have kept the distance and not go into him straight away, I think I could have won that fight. He even told me afterwards that I hit him with a right hand, and he thought, "Oh my god, I need to get Larry out of there ASAP." So yeah, and I kind of feel like the ref at that point should have let me carry on. I wasn't hurt bad, but it is what it is. It's that's how it was meant to be, and yeah.
Did you get on well with Frank Maloney?
I never really had much interaction with him, to be honest with you. It was all business, so it, yeah. I mean,
Nothing personal, just business.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I was warned early that he likes a pound note and is quite stingy with it. So yeah, and then and that's why I ended up leaving him to go to Frank Warren,
Right.
because he
Okay.
wanted to pay me pittance for that McDermott fight. And he'd been paying me pittance up until then, but I took it on, on the advice that, it'll get better in the next one. It'll get better in the next one. And then I just finally had enough and just said, nah, this isn't happening. One thing I did promise myself, knowing the sport I'm going into, was that I would not be taken advantage of,
So because yeah, it's interesting in terms of promoters and not being taken advantage of. Like it's one thing to, I suppose, your education, even if it was in something different, and your outlook on life had made you pretty worldly wise by the time you got to that point in your career anyway.
Yeah, 100%. I'm always someone who, you know, I was a very critical thinker even at a young age, and I was very strong-willed. I still am, but yeah, I wouldn't say stubborn, just strong-willed. If I feel like this is something that I want to pursue, or I'm right, I'm going to be very dogged about it. But at the same time, I'm the first one to admit if I'm wrong. So I don't let that kind of that dogged, that doggedness become a disadvantage. But yeah, I've always been strong-willed like that, and like I said, I always said, I made myself, I said to myself certain things when I became a boxer, and I said, look, no one's going to take advantage of me, but at the same time, I'm not going to be too obsessed with money. So, if I'm happy with what I'm getting for a fight, I don't care what the other guy's making. I don't care what the manager's making. I don't care what the promoter's making, because you're just going to make yourself sick going in that merry-go-round, and it's not going to do anyone's physical or mental health any good. So as long as I'm happy with what I'm getting, I'm satisfied.
Because it's worth mentioning, a lot of these fights we're talking about, they were on Sky Sports, weren't they?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
obviously, you'd imagine certain dollar signs in your eyes by being on TV, or people do, don't they? People do. I remember, I've had this conversation with plenty of fighters, including Wayne Elcock, who actually didn't mind, but he would be on a Saturday night or Friday night main event as it was back then, and then he'd be doing his work for British Telecom and going up and servicing people's houses on the Monday morning. They're like, "Aren't you that guy off the TV?" But everyone
yeah,
expects that they see you on TV and you're living out in a mansion somewhere.
yeah. A
Um,
lot of people, think I was a millionaire by the time the McDermott fight rolled around, and I mean, my biggest purse, which was the fight before McDermott and McDermott, was 10 grand, which is
Wow.
basically nothing.
Did you make more for the armed robbery than that?
Probably not.
So then came Sam Sexton, who stopped you in the fourth. Sam was a good fighter, wasn't he?
Oh no, he didn't stop me. That got stopped because of the headbutt.
Oh yes, okay, yep, sure, I'm with
Yeah,
you. And there was a okay, I've got you. Yeah, there was
yeah,
a cut. I
yeah.
do.
So that fight I was really pissed off with because I was getting the measure of Sam on that one. I was getting me because I'd hooked up with a good friend of mine, Dave Pereira, who I really rate as a coach. He's very underrated as a coach, and I worked with him solid for a year. And I think a lot of people was expecting Sam to blow me away in a round or two because of what happened with McDermott. And I think as they saw that fight progress, they were like, "Oh, Larry's improved." And and the thing is, when that headbutt happened, I could hear him breathing heavy, and I was like, "Right, I got you. I'm gonna put you away before this fight gets to the eighth, which was it was an 8 rounder." And then that's when they changed the rules. Instead of making it a no contest, they went straight to the cards, and he was up by 1 point, and they gave him the fight, which I thought was extremely unfair. I don't even know how he was up by a point because he didn't hit me with anything, but it is what it is. But yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned Dave Pereira, who worked with Danny Williams towards the end of his career, didn't he?
Yeah. Dave's a very underrated coach. He also helped Anthony Small get
Yeah.
the British Commonwealth. Yeah, yeah.
So then obviously you know where we're going now. In fact, I've done the podcast
Do I?
with Sam, and Sam said he'd never been tested in his career up to that point, and so you guys both do tests afterwards. You fail the test, but like, is it based on a collection that night, or have they tested you before, or what?
So I've never been tested up to that point. So it's a funny sequence of events that happened before that fight. So 2 days before the fight, I get a call from my missus at the time, no longer my missus now, saying that there's people at the door and they say they're from the boxing authorities. And I was like, boxing authorities? What they doing there? Find out later that they actually that's what UK anti-doping do. They say they're boxing authorities, which I think is really stupid because everyone knows no one from the British Boxing Board are going to come to your door like they're the police. But at the time, I remember I was thinking, who are they? And I think they came again. And I was out and about, and again I got the call saying that they're. And I thought to myself, you know what? That's anti-doping. They're the only ones that are going to come to your door. So and then I realized that I hadn't been keeping an eye on my protocol as I normally did because I hadn't been tested. So I just figured I can do whatever I like. So I was like, damn. I tried to think about when I had my last injection of testosterone, Trembolone, which I was on at the time, and EPO. And I figured, yeah, I'm not going to pass the test. So I went to my mom's house, and then came back really late at night to my place. And then, so we're talking about 2 days before the fight, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to pass the test. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if they come, I don't know why I thought this. I thought if they've come to my house, they're most likely not going to come on the night, are they? And I think I just convinced myself that they're not going to come on the night, knowing that I've still got the substances in my body because I hadn't been, like I said, keeping an eye on my protocol. So on the night, as soon as I came in there, they were on me. They were on me, so I was like, "Yeah, well, it is what it is." I was hoping that the test wasn't as good as they claim it to be, and it wasn't, to be honest, because, like I said, I'd been using 3 drugs at that point, and I only tested positive for one, which was the EPO. So they didn't catch the testosterone, they didn't catch the trenbolone. So yeah.
So when you did the test, was it a urine test?
Yeah.
You knew you were going to get caught.
Most likely, yeah. Yeah.
So was it a little bit like in terms of civilians like myself, is it like a flash from a speed camera and you're waiting for the post?
Yeah, pretty much. That's a good analogy. That's a really good analogy. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
so is that how it is? Like you're looking at the mail thinking, or
Yeah.
you wait for a phone call or whatever it is?
Phone
Yeah, yeah.
call, mail, whatever, like, and throughout, I'm thinking, no news is good news, right? No news is because I'm new to this anti-doping thing, so just thinking to myself, no news is good news. No news is good news, and then the news came. I forgot how it came. That I tested positive, and yeah.
So,
Like I said, I was actually surprised. It was just the one that they picked up.
so what was this thing then? Because there's something that it says just doing the research, there were 13 substances, or were you taking 13 things? Like, what's that?
Right. So that's a very common misconception that UK anti-doping don't want to clear up, because obviously I've had my in and outs with them. So I got caught for EPO. Subsequently, to do a deal with them to not get a 4-year ban, I had to tell them everything that I'd been doing up until that point, which was where the 13 drugs came in. Those are the drugs that I'd been using throughout the period of time that I've been boxing. But because it's a sensational headline, it was like, oh, Larry was caught with 13 drugs in his system. No, it wasn't. It was just the EPO. So yeah, that's a very common misconception.
It also looked like, with your size, you obviously looked like a bull, and probably people thought that you were removing needles on your walks to the ring, because of how you look. Like you just had that look, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I've got some things here which I find it really interesting, particularly obviously in the current climate. But this was part of the 2007 raw deal stings, right? From steroid labs around the world, particularly I think in America and Mexico. So agents were working with WADA, who found a supplier's emails that included your orders and basically your back history, right, and transactions and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was ordering it from China, and there was a go between the pharmaceutical companies. Well, this guy was a go between, so between the pharmaceutical companies and the end buyer. So he was getting good prices. He could get a whole load of substances that I would find very hard to get in either in this country or abroad. And yeah, I was buying from him quite a lot.
Did you think, obviously, I know you got caught in the hop when anti-doping and you started to take things for granted, but did you have enough knowledge with what you knew that made you think you knew enough to get away with it? Or did you just think you weren't going to get tested?
Oh, I had enough knowledge to get away with it. Yeah, I used, like I said, I used my pharmaceutical chemistry degree to help me out in that respect, because I knew about drug half-lives, the detection time, the equipment that they use to detect, which is the liquid chromatography, mass spectrometer, so I knew pretty much. And then also speaking to other athletes in other sports that I used to train with and stuff, so on and so forth. I knew the what was going on, so to speak, in those sports. So it was a little bit of both. In because you said also, did I think I wasn't going to be tested? Yes, I towards the Sam Sexton fight, I did think that, and that's why I just kind of abandoned any sort of strict adherence to my protocol by then. But when I became a pro, I was very strict to what I was, coming off of certain drugs at certain points to make sure that I test I don't test positive on the night because I didn't think they were doing random testing at that point, and they weren't. They weren't. So yeah.
So had you been on stuff from the start?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, what did a day look like? Obviously, I know you've kind of narrowed it down to 3 substances, right? So it's not like, because obviously here's me thinking 13 things that you've got: pill containers, needles, and all sorts. I mean, but was it one thing 3 times a day, or is it, certain stuff certain amount of times per month, or did it vary depending on what you were on and
It,
dosages and all the rest of
yeah,
it?
it depended. It depended on what you were using, because there's so much variety in terms of what you're using and how you use it. So, for instance, if I'm using testosterone, I always use a long ester testosterone. I have a testosterone enanthate or sustanon. So you could take that once every week as an injection. If you're using growth hormone is an everyday injection, or at the very least an every other day injection. EPO was an every other day injection. Then things like your orals like Dianabol, you take 1 or 2 pills a day. It just depends, and I mean, yeah, I was not on a lot of stuff, but I used to I used to try a lot of different things to see what would be best for me and my sport and my body. So because I'm always also conscious of health ramifications. So I mean, for the most part, these drugs don't necessarily cause you any health ramifications, but obviously if you're careless with them, they can do. So I was always
Yeah.
conscious of that as well. Yeah. So I used to get blood tested and make sure that all my health parameters were on point. And yeah.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there. Obviously, the health thing was something actually that you reminded me, because I did want to ask about that, because in the old days it seemed to be a bit more Russian roulette, as in people didn't really know what they were taking, but they knew what the upside was.
Mm.
Has it changed now? And I suppose with your background and your intelligence about the subject, you weren't rolling the dice with your health, but people still now rolling the dice with their health, with what they're taking? If like, is it
Uh,
is all the dodgy stuff out of it now? Is it progressed to a level now where it's only decent stuff, decent in inverted commas, you know what I mean? Is it not going to
yeah,
endanger your health?
that's a little bit of a double-edged sword because that's quite yeah. So basically, before the before the 2000s, it was mainly pharmaceutical grade uh, anabolic steroids that you could get. You couldn't get underground lab stuff. But I think with a lot of the pharmaceutical grade steroids disappearing, either being discontinued or just becoming very hard to get, a lot of these underground labs started popping up. Now, the problem with these underground labs, I mean, you had some good ones, but you don't know anything about their quality control. So there's the aspect of am I taking what I actually bought and think I'm taking, but then there's also a health ramification, especially when it comes to the injectable steroids. Am I taking a steroid product? So I think in those terms, there could have been health ramifications, and a lot of people did, get abscesses, infections, and so on and so forth from what they term dirty gear. Having but then there are the better labs, and so I used my know-how to kind of figure out which were the better underground labs. But then there's also another side to that, in that once you are um, once you're further along in with your doping, and people, or you've read some things and about how the anti-doping protocols, what takes place, you're very aware that, as it still is today, the most effective drugs and the best drugs to avoid detection with are the drugs that your body makes naturally. So that's your testosterone, that's your growth hormone, that's your EPO. Insulin for some people, but I wouldn't mess around with that. But yeah, those three in particular are the drugs that are very effective, but at the same time, because your body makes them, it's very, very, it can be very hard to detect them. And in fact, that's how a lot of athletes now are avoiding testing positive, because you can microdose these, and with the way the testing anti-doping tests set up, you cannot be tested between the hours of 11 p.m. and 6 to 7 a.m. So if you take any of those growth hormone, EPO, or fast acting testosterone at 11 o'clock, by 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, it's out of your system. So this is how most athletes are passing drug tests. So all these athletes that shout from the rooftops, "Oh, I'm clean, I've never failed a drug test," that doesn't mean absolutely jack. And we all know who all these athletes, or in terms of boxing, we know who they are anyway. But yeah, it doesn't mean anything, not failing a drug test. I mean, how many drug tests did Lance Armstrong fail? He'd been doing it for years. It's just you come to the point where you understand what you need to do to avoid testing positive, and once you know that, world's your oyster, so to speak. I mean, I watched yesterday, funnily enough, a documentary about Victor Conti and the whole Balco Labs.
Yeah, I just watched it yesterday as well. Yeah, on Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. And they figured they figured it out as well. I mean, obviously they had the undetectable steroid, which helped big time, but they also were using the same drugs, testosterone, the EPO, the growth hormone, because those are the most effective drugs, and those are drugs that your body makes. So that it's very difficult to detect. Sorry. Yeah.
So without naming names, you say, "Oh yeah, we all know who these people are." I mean, I don't know who these people are. Like, so do you see? Is it? Do you look at people and say, "Yeah, they're on it," like without a shadow of a doubt? Is it an eye test or what?
Somewhat. So I'm not going to mention any names, but
No,
somewhat.
sure.
So there's guys, for instance, that, I mean, I've seen your physique. I know you know about training. There's no way that you could put on 30 pounds of muscle in a year and at the same time be doing a crazy amount of cardio.
Sure.
You know that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you put on 30 pounds, but you're not differentiating whether it's muscle or fat, that's possible. But if you're talking about 30 pounds of just muscle, that's not possible naturally. That's absolutely not possible naturally. But there are guys, plenty of guys, who are doing that.
So, but you're talking about and I remember you said at the time, I think I've got a quote for later on when we talk about this specifically, but like you were saying, oh, there's loads of cruiserweights and heavyweights doing it. But obviously, through the weights now, there's people with blotted copybooks in boxing. So yes, the eye test for the bigger people, but now obviously, and you mentioned Lance Armstrong. He's not a tank, is he? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how, in terms of the lower weight guys, is there an eye test for them? And also, like, whether, I mean, I will mention a name. So obviously, say Canelo's got his checkered history, right? But what people do with Canelo is they'll put a picture of him as a 22-year-old up against a picture of him as a 34-year-old who has gone up through the weights, and maybe the picture of him is, taken with the sun behind him, so he's shaded in his body, so he's not got, like, he doesn't look ripped in the front and all the rest of it. And then there's another picture with him either weighing in and looking massive, or looking like maybe he's just gone back to camp and he's chopping down trees, and he's probably gone into camp about 30 pounds heavier or 20 pounds heavier, and and the sun's in front of him and he's shredded and he's in a different pose. Like, with the eye test, you'd be like, oh yeah, geez, look at the difference. But like, there are, and it's another thing I talk about sometimes. Like if you think, oh yeah, look at him, he wasn't knocking people out 4 years ago, and now he's knocking people out, and it's 4 years on. Well, some of these guys are training double sessions and 300 days a year. You think so? Just over 4 years, for instance, that's 300, 600, 900, 1,200 training sessions. You are watching your nutrition, you're monitoring your recovery, you are entitled to be performing differently 4 years on if you're doing all the right things without, it surely you are entitled to make legitimate natural improvements without having to go on stuff, be it physically or in terms of performance. You'd be stupid for doing all the training if you weren't improving, right?
Yeah, but what you're talking about is, if you're talking about training naturally, yes, you're gonna make improvements, but like you mentioned something, that if you're training all these training sessions, first of all, how are you even training all these training sessions? How are you doing all these training sessions? 2-3 times a day. That in itself is a red flag, because the body the body can only recover so much. And one thing that a lot of exercise specialists will tell you is that actually the fitter you are, the lower your recovery abilities are, because you're able to do more, but your body's recovery ability doesn't catch up to that. So that in itself is a red flag. If an athlete is able to string together for a year all these hard training sessions, and recover from it, that is a red flag. So, because if you're training naturally, your training sessions are going to be like this. You're going to have good training sessions, bad training sessions. You're going to be ill. You know what I mean? It's so yes, and the UK cyclists try to use that. What's the term they use? Marginal gains, which was funny, but which we now know was bollocks, because their chief doctor's been banned for giving them testosterone, but no athletes seen a ban. But anyway, we digress. But yeah, if you're training naturally, there's going to be a ceiling, and I'm sorry to say, you're not going to develop knockout power. Yes, you might develop more power, but to go from a decent puncher to a knockout artist, that's not going to happen naturally. It's just not going to happen naturally. That's like me saying, I'm going to go from a 10-7 sprinter, and naturally over, I don't know, 2 years, I'm going to be running 9.9. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen naturally. No, no matter how hard I want it, no matter how hard I train naturally, that's not going to happen. But if you have, and don't get me wrong, there's outliers. That's one thing. There are some outliers, but again, that's not the norm.
Right.
And because of the situation the way it is, you can't really figure out who these outliers are.
Sure.
Because as we've seen, nearly everyone's at it. Nearly everyone's is at it. So it's a very difficult subject to educate people on, because there's nuances to it, and it's not always the eye test, but but the eye test is different for everyone, because sometimes it's about physique, sometimes it's about performance. It's just different. There's so many different things you've got to look for.
Yeah, so I don't know if you saw the Dr. Usman YouTube video where he was talking. It's funny you talk about physique there, because obviously you were obviously a tank, an absolute unit. But he was saying like the ones that you're not, that you least expect, are like the bigger dudes who don't look much, but who have the capacity to throw volumes, high volume fights, high volume punches for fights for 12 rounds. And I think he cited one or two, and I'm not going to name them here, but anyone who wants to go down and find that interview can do. But It's funny because I've felt this in the competitions I've done, where I think I'm supposed to look a certain way and be a certain level, and people are probably quite disappointed when they see what my engine's like and how and what kind of athlete I actually am. And I've been beaten by guys who are shorter than me, podgier than me, and all the rest of it. And I'm like, and I'm not saying they're on stuff, but I'm like, they might be on stuff, but based on what I've heard, because it's not just a physique thing. Some of the guys with the best engines who don't look much might be the ones taking the stuff. One thing you did say there is it's quite a complex subject, and you've used a lot of terms I'm very unfamiliar with. Are you fascinated by it? Like when something
Oh,
comes up, are you like, do you get your not do you get your kicks, but are you like really interested when the stuff hits the fan?
um, I'm very interested in PEDs in general. Like so I always knew I was going to take PEDs. When Ben Johnson won that 100 meters, because I'm a big comic book fan. I've that influenced me, and comic books influenced me in a big way, especially Marvel comics. Right, I've always wanted to look like those guys in the comics, and when I saw Ben Johnson do what he did, I was like, whatever he's using, I want some of that stuff. Like I knew, and I was 10 at that point. I knew I was going to
Wow.
take PEDs at some point, right? So it's always fascinated me. Now, obviously, the more knowledge that I've gained through my degree and whatnot, the more I realized that these things can be used safely. They're obviously in medicine, um, but unfortunately, it's the stigma that's put upon PEDs that's the problem, and the way that everyone's tried to go about the whole PED issue has been the wrong way. If you look at Charlie Francis, Ben Johnson's coach, he always said, look, the best way to go about this is to only allow people to use the drugs that are naturally produced in your body, as I mentioned earlier. Test these athletes for their health parameters and the other drugs, apart from the ones that are naturally in your body, and then therefore you take care of the safety aspect and the fair play aspect, which I always thought was a good in between. Um, but to answer your question, I don't really care anymore when people pop. I mean, Alicia, what's her name, Baumgartner,
Gardner.
whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, she's popped. I get a whole every time someone pops, I get a whole bunch of messages. I always hear you're all right, and I see Twitter blow up and people tagging me and whatnot. It makes it gives me a certain I'm satisfied in the sense that it shows that I was right all along, as because I came out and said most of the athletes are on it, right? And even just a couple of years ago, I was on a podcast with Richard Poxon and I think Johnny Nelson and Ade Oladipo, and I came out and I said conservatively 80% of pay-per-view fighters are on drugs. And Eddie Hearn felt the need to come out and slate me and say, "Oh, Larry's a bitter loser," blah 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 blah. So I get a special kind of satisfaction when I see matchroom fighters popping dirty. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, yeah, what have you got to say for yourself now? Because it's always telling when someone makes an argument a personal thing. I wasn't personal with Eddie. I made a statement based on my observations, my interactions, and so on and so forth. I didn't make it personal. He felt he had to make it personal. And I always see that as you've lost the argument straight away. And now the chickens are coming home to roost, as they say. So yeah, in that sense, I kind of get a little satisfaction out of it. But at this point, if people haven't figured out that they need to find a new approach to this whole anti-doping thing, then it's not my problem. I don't care.
When you got caught, you said, in fact, I think Bruce Baker told me you applied to Luxembourg to carry on straight away.
Yeah, that's actually nonsense. I don't know why Bruce Baker actually said that. But, and how do you even know that? Because I barely speak to Bruce Baker. So he must have heard that from someone. Nah, that didn't happen.
Okay.
That
But
didn't happen.
it does. I mean, it's perfectly logical, like in terms of that's how boxing is, right? You get banned somewhere, you can pop up somewhere else. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
we've seen it. But also in at the time you said in 4 years' time I'll be back. So you that was your plan, right? That was your plan to
Yeah,
you
yeah,
were always going
yeah.
to come back. But you were allowed to come back within 13 months. So is it 13 months based on each? Is it a month for each thing you admitted to?
No, it was just what was it? So basically what happened was I was given so they didn't want it's weird how this happened because even though the ban everyone thought I was banned for 4 years, it was actually 2 years. But for some reason they didn't want to put it out there that it was for 2 years. Maybe there'll be backlash, I don't know, whatever. But then what happened was I got contacted by UK Anti-Doping because of Craig Windsor Jr. Because obviously we had conversations where he was talking about PEDs, but I didn't help him at all. But he was also being investigated by the police for some other stuff. I don't know what was that about. The police liaised with UK Anti-Doping, so they were privy to the messages. They phoned me up. I assured them that I wasn't doing anything because I didn't give them any advice. And they said, right, you can get your ban further down if you're willing to come to a hearing and say that he sent you these messages. Now I don't know Craig Windsor. I've got no obligations towards him. He's not a friend. He was just a Facebook person who started messaging me and wanted advice. So I came to the hearing and I said, yeah, he sent me these messages, and then therefore it was the ban was lifted straight away, and at that point it was 30 months. So yeah, and the British Boxing Board Control had a right shock when my application for my license reached their desk, and they obviously weren't going to grant it. But then it was told to them that because they've signed up to UCAD, which is part of WADA, they have to follow WADA rules, and the WADA rules state that I am now eligible to get my license back. So if they didn't have a good reason not to give me my license, I could sue them. So they had to give me my license back.
So you were back. You came into prize fighter. You fought Jason Gavin. Then you fought Sexton again as well. Did you guys mention? Did you guys talk about the previous fight and the previous tests and everything else? You and Sexton?
Nah. I mean, to be honest with you, I got jobbed in prize fighter. I could see what was going on. It was also told to me by a prominent ref afterwards that they were going to make sure that I never advanced in that prize fighter, and so for me, I was just like disillusioned with the sport, and I thought to myself, you know what, it's time to find something else to do, and that's when I decided I was going to go back. I was going to go to drama school, and having gotten advice from Gary Stretch, who's an actor now, living out in LA. So I went to drama school, but then I thought to myself, okay, how am I going to fund drama school and my lifestyle generally? Because I don't really want to go and do a 9 to 5 for now. So I just decided to go on the road. So after prize fight, I never really trained much. I just went on the road, and that Sexton fight was part of being on the road.
So yeah, so you were in the blue corner a lot then. So Dave Allen, Gary Cornish, Ali Adams. By the way, any good Dave Allen stories from fighting him?
Not really.
That's it. That's it. And then you kept going until Huey Fury in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
What made you call it a day? Why was enough then? Was the acting stuff starting to come in?
The acting stuff was starting to come in. The acting stuff started to come in, and yeah, I didn't feel the need to be on the road anymore, basically. So,
Did you have regrets over your career and how things panned out?
somewhat, because after I decided to call it quits, I did want after a few months I did want to come back, and I was actually preparing to come back, but obviously not as a journeyman anymore, as you know, as a contender again, but and that was because you could say I had regrets, but I just felt like I had unfinished business. But then I thought to myself, why are you putting yourself through this again? Like you've done it. They can never take that away from you, and you're doing well in another avenue that you've always wanted to do. So, like, just leave it alone, basically. So, yeah.
Do you think they should take your wins away from you from the start?
Doesn't bother me. They can do what they like.
Because in some it's different in boxing, isn't it? Because obviously I think Tony Thompson has still got the wins over David Price, and they just sort of leave it and just crack on.
Yeah, I mean, it was said to me that they were going to take the wins off of me, and I don't know if they did. I don't know if they did. It might be. I mean, I'm past caring. They can do what they like. It doesn't bother me in the slightest, you know.
In terms of acting, what I've got to say, after we chatted the other day, I had a look at your IMDb and I saw a range of parts. The variety
Yeah.
is mind blowing, to be quite frank. Stuff I never imagined. What's been the best gig so far?
Uh, um, hmm. Well, the biggest gig obviously was Venom. Venom, Let There Be Carnage. I mean, that was all over the papers when I landed that role. Even though that was a small role, but it's a huge blockbuster. I mean, the film ended up making $500 million. So yeah, and obviously it's a Marvel film, which I love Marvel. So that was fantastic to be in. I think my favorite though was CBBC TV series called Almost Never. Yeah,
That was
I
quite
really
that was diverse, right? It's not what you do.
yeah.
Is I bet when you were serving hard time, you never thought you'd be doing that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you could say that. You could say that. That was it was definitely. I mean, that was a security guard who was a secret boy band lover, and yeah, so he's like, he's like a fangirl when he meets the boy band, and it's like, but obviously I've trained for this. I've trained to be an actor, so I know how to portray that. So it's funny because when I actually auditioned for that role, obviously they wanted big, intimidating guys who could then switch it up. So when I came in, they weren't ready for what I was bringing because I started screaming and was like, and the guy was just like, whoa. He's like, do that again. I did it again. And they're not allowed to do this, the casting director, but it was kind of like, you're going to get this role. And I've heard that before. So I didn't really pay any mind to it. But then I think the next week I got a call from my agent saying, yeah, you got the role. So yeah, that obviously worked.
So as things stand, there's no danger of you being typecast, which I guess must have been a concern at the start, right?
Yeah, yes and no. But I mean, because typecasting, it's not a problem if you're getting work. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, if you're getting regular work, then being typecast is not really a problem, for as far as I see it, anyway. But there can be a point where you might want to be in a certain kind of role, and because you've not been seen in anything else but a certain type of role, you might not be seen for or be thought of for that. So it's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword. But I'm glad that, because that was the thing about me. I knew I could do different things. I knew I had a natural talent for acting. That's why I always wanted to do it. But when obviously getting into my acting career, I knew that I could do a diverse range of roles. So for me, it was I had to make sure that very early on I was getting auditions that showed me in different lights, so that I'm not stuck in a certain type of role. So yeah, that is and for the most part it's worked. I mean, I'm still not getting the kind of auditions I really want to really launch my career, but I think that will come. I think that will come, and it's just the process, isn't it?
So you got to be an extrovert, right? Because I could never do that stuff in front of camera, even the serious stuff. Like you got to be a certain way, haven't you, to be able to deliver lines in front of, because it's not just you and a cameraman. There's you
Mm,
and producers, directors, other cast members who you're probably completely strange with. Like for me, acting is, and this isn't me trying to be all, posh in terms of acting stuff because I don't know, but from what I've done in terms of TV stuff is, and particularly the stuff to camera, it's horrendously difficult.
mm.
And that's even just playing me, let alone doing the fangirl stuff you talk about. Like, is it hard to put yourself out there? Or are you an extrovert, or is it just all part of the training?
Do you know what? I'm not an extrovert, but if you put me in the right setting, I can be. And I think that's a lot of actors because there's a lot of actors that are introverts. It's weird. Acting is really weird because you get such a range of different people, and their motivations for acting is just different. I've met like some of the biggest, like I've met Ian McKellen. He is so introverted. It's unreal. You're just like, how is this guy an actor? But then you see him work, and it's just like, wow,
Light
you know.
switch. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you get some other guys who are just extroverts, and they just love the limelight, and that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't feel like I'm an extrovert, but at the same time, I do love. I've realized even from my boxing days, I do love a camera pointed at me. I do love a camera, like, and that helped me a lot as as a boxer because people saw that, oh, I'm not the typical pug. I could actually articulate myself. You know, which helped a lot. And so but I will say the boxing helps tremendously with helped my acting tremendously because being in that like I always say it to other actors. I've been in the Echo Arena with 10,000 people, and I could be knocked out my ass and look a fool, but I didn't care. So me standing up in front of 1,000 people on the stage, it's nothing to me. I recently just done a play at the Fairfield Hall in Croydon, and there was like 700 odd people there, and there was a couple of people who it was their first play, and I had to explain that to them that don't worry about these people because once you get into it, you just like fighting, just like boxing, you can't even hear the crowd. You're just immersed in what you're doing. You've got that first circle kind of atmosphere.
Yeah.
So don't even worry about it. So in that respect, boxing helped me a lot.
Yeah, I think to be fair in that respect as well, sometimes when I've had difficult situations, like whether it's public speaking or whatever, sometimes I do think back to my amateur days and think, well, there's no one out there waiting to take my head off. So it's easier. It's
Yeah,
not as hard as that, is it? Because obviously,
yeah.
I used to be quite an apprehensive boxer, so I used to get nerves and all the rest of it. Kind of think once you've been through that and once you've
Mm.
done that walk, everything else is just that little bit easier, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I think this is why boxing needs to come back in schools, or at least some sort of form of combat sport, like whether it's karate or whatever, because I feel like that's what's missing in young people today. That confidence. It's just that I can handle myself. I don't need to carry a knife. I can handle myself. Because back in the day, you'd have a fight and that's the end of it. Like now, people. I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about how we grew up. Like we weren't afraid to get in scraps because we got smacked at home. So we're used to getting hit. So it's nothing to go out there, have a fight, you get hit a couple of times. Okay, cool, I can handle that. But now kids don't want to be hit, and they can't handle being hit. So it's like, okay, I'm not going to get hit, so I'm going to carry a knife. It's one of those ones. So I really think something like boxing needs to be back in the schools, and kids need to be forced to do things like that to give
Yeah.
them that self confidence and yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a self-discipline, self-confidence thing, and it's a tough one though, isn't it? Because you also want it to be organic. But I suppose the thing is, if people, and you'll go back to this in terms of the people you've seen in Hackney, whether it's James Cook or Terry Dunstan, there's a certain sort of aura around boxers anyway, like in
Mm,
terms of the community, like they are seen to be community leaders who don't need that stuff, right? And they're,
yeah,
it's one of the reasons why a lot of people, your normal sort of drug dealers and bouncers and that, like they all want to be friends with the fighters because they've got respect for them.
yeah, 100%. I mean, I think they've got that respect in terms of they would love to be doing what the fighter is doing. I
Yeah.
get that a lot. They would love to be, because like you said, those kind of people, the drug dealers, the bouncers, they want to see themselves as the tough guy, the alpha, and obviously being a fighter, you can't be more alpha than that. So I think, I think that's a lot to do with it.
So, Larry, I've got to ask you, when we did this My Body piece in Fight and Fit, I don't know if you remember, it's the first ever Fight and Fit magazine. Do you remember it?
I do.
So I said to you, oh, what do people, people say you're on steroids and stuff all the time or PEDs and you're like, yeah, people say that all the time. I think you said it was to training and family genetics. Um, the lie detector on that.
Well, it's not actually lies because I'm still a lump now. I'm still 19 stone. Um, I still bench. I've not used anything in years. I still bench 140 kilos for 8 reps. I squat 180 for 12 reps. It is genetic. If you only have to look at my brother as well. My dad was a lump. Like I said, I come from a family sprinters and all sorts. So if you want it, my son is going to be a lot bigger than me, judging the rate at which he's growing. He's probably going to be bigger than me when he gets to about 10 years old. So, I mean, it is genetic, but yes, I accept that. Yeah, obviously, I was using PEDs, but I wasn't using it as uh, a lot of people probably think I was just on PEDs and I was eating PEDs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it wasn't that. It wasn't that. No, I used it when I needed to use it. So yeah.
So did you go cold turkey afterwards? Did you stop?
Yeah, yeah.
So once you got busted, that was it. You never went back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So afterwards, obviously before then you were winning a lot of your fights, and afterwards there was, obviously we talked about you being in the blue corner. So did it change you as a fighter? Were you not as good off them?
I didn't train.
So it was down to
You can
that.
speak you can speak to the people who were calling me at the time, which was Ben Doughty, who I don't really speak to anymore. But I never trained. I because I was wary that I'm on the road. And I know me. If I start training, I'm going to upset the apple cart. So I know I need to be losing to get regular work. Um, and so I don't need to train. I just need to be able to survive in there. And I know how to do that. So,
When you
I mean,
say
the only,
losing weight, you need to lose weight to get regular acting gigs.
no, no, no,
No, sorry. So
no.
what did you say? You said I need to be losing.
Yeah, losing fights
Oh, okay. I
as a
see what you
journeyman.
mean. I see.
Yeah.
My bad.
So, I literally did maybe 2, 3 sessions before the fight. And that was just to, you know, punch the bags and punch the pads, and that's it. I never trained. I never once I decided to be a journeyman, I barely trained. I barely trained.
Was there, so it was just a huge psychological shift all told. You've gone from like a bit of a winning mentality to thinking it's just a different gig now.
Yeah. And I'm very good at doing things like that. I don't. Once I've made, like I said, I'm very strong willed. So once I've made my mind up, okay, this is what I want to do now, and this is how I'm going to do it. I just follow it. It's just this. Yeah, that's just the way I'm built.
So I dug out another interview that we did. We did a couple, and it said here, but this is, let me ask you this in terms of where we're at today in the sport as a whole. At the time, you told me a lot of people's favorite fighters are taking them. I know it's rife. I felt I was doing what I needed to compete on a level playing field. Going by what I know, I think it's rife in the cruiserweights and heavyweights. You stand by that now. You think it's rife in the sport from top to bottom.
Tris, I don't even have to answer that. Just from what you've seen since for the last few years, I think you could even answer that yourself.
I think. Do you know what I think? So this is what I think, Larry. I go through spells of thinking everyone's on it, and then I go through spells where
Mhm,
maybe you just call me naive, where I just don't think that the education is there. Like you will know, like a lot of the gyms that I go to, are poor gyms where people don't even know how to squat
mhm,
properly, and they think that the
mhm,
way to make weight is by starving yourselves and not even having water.
mhm.
So like there's still a
Yeah.
huge old school stuff. So when you talk about all the things you talked about, which I couldn't even say and pronounce, to then talking about thinking not drinking water and not hydrating is good for you. There's a massive disconnect here in my head of people using old school mentalities and old school training methods, but then trying to be ahead of the curve of scientific testers. I can't marry that up in my mind. How do these people know what to
I,
take to avoid tests and to avoid
well,
this when they're training in two bob gyms and can't squat properly?
that's where, because I was an anomaly in terms of being able to do my own protocols and knowing XYZ about all sorts of substances. Most boxers, like you said, don't know that. But guess what? They'll find someone that does. I There was a very, because I'm still good friends with him, so I'm not going to mention his name. But there was a very prominent boxer in this country who said to me, in fact, there was two of them, very prominent. One actually won a world title, and they said to me, if I can use PEDs and get away with it, I would be on it. In fact, one of them's been caught already. I'm not going to mention it. One of them's been caught already. But that those are, and I've had numerous boxers not come up to me for advice, but they will say to me, if the same sort of in the same thing, but in a different sort of way, that if they knew that they could get away with it, they would use it. And so all they're looking for is that person, whether rightly or wrongly, they should be advising people to come over to them and say, I can help you with this. Now, to be fair, most people who do advise are not very good at it. I mean, this is why people are getting caught for the stuff they're getting caught for. You know, I've even heard what Dylan White got caught for was, anyway. Um, but yeah, it's that. I think that people take advantage of the fact that, as you said, a lot of these boxers are stuck in the dark ages when it comes to sports nutrition and PEDs and so on and so forth. But their will to win, their will to take themselves above the station that they're at, in terms of lifestyle and for them and their family, supersedes all of that. So they will trust someone, rightly or wrongly, with that, with their sorting that out for them because they can't do it themselves.
Why are you speaking like this? And why are you so accepting of the situation now? Why don't we have reams of excuses from you and admission? Why are you admitting and open about this? And why does everyone have a reason for a dirty test now? No, because this is the thing, right? This is the thing. When you're not scientifically educated, myself included, you know, there's always a statement that comes out saying, I don't know, I'd never do anything like this. And obviously, you want to see the best in people. You read these statements, you might roll your eyes, but you think, oh, well, maybe they are. Maybe they are clean. Like, I hope so. I hope there's something wrong. What? But no one holds their hands up. Like, obviously, I know that you failed a test, and obviously there was obviously the evidence that goes back to that operation. But like, there's no one admits to this stuff at all. No one says, "Oh yeah, you got me. I'll do my time. I'll be back in a couple of years."
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Raw Deal, but at the end of the day, They knew that I'd been at it for a while, though they didn't have specifics. So that's why I was readily. I just wanted to tell them, because I agree with what Charlie Francis said, and I said this to you earlier, that I think the PD issue needs to be handled different, and they should allow substances that your body readily makes. Because I mean, I get that a lot of this issue is lack of critical thinking, because everyone wants to jump on the bandwagon. Oh yeah, you're going to kill someone, blah 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 blah. That doesn't take into account the fact that it's a dangerous sport and people have died already. So it's not like, and I'm not trying to trivialize. I'm just trying to make a point. It's not like someone dying because a boxer who used PEDs faced someone who didn't have PEDs in their system, and now that's a new thing. Like, oh my God, that's a death. There's many bodies in the sport. So how is that any different? Are you saying that? Are people trying to say that? Not you specifically, obviously, but are people trying to say, oh, if you die in the ring, but there's no PEDs involved, then that's fine. But if there's PEDs involved, then we need to make an issue out of it. People don't think along these lines. And then if you're really concerned about people that, like, there are still some sports supplements that actually work. Yes, they're few and far between, but there are some, like creatine, which is naturally made in the body, that work really well. Like, the strength gains I can get off creatine rival any steroid I've ever taken. So then if we come to that, if we say, okay, you're concerned about deaths in boxing from PEDs, but then if someone improves so much, so with a natural supplement, and they kill someone in the ring, that's fine. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, no one critically thinks about this. No one thinks, okay, but what about if that happens? Then are we saying that's fine? So then are we saying get rid of supplements as well as PEDs in boxing so we can avoid deaths? And then on top of that, we've got the aspect that we know this game is rigged, in a sense that people will be training for weeks and then they'll just go and get someone who hasn't even been training and say, yeah, jump in the ring with this guy for a few thousand. That guy's risking his life, isn't he? But that's readily accepted.
Well, I suppose the
Do
thing
you see
is,
what I'm saying?
so yes, I do, and so I can counter that, because obviously if you're not fighting with a level playing field, and I know you're talking about different versions of level playing fields, but if I'm only on creatine and that's all I'm on, but someone else is on, whatever else, then the argue is morally and ethically, and say we go to the worst case scenario and someone dies, then at what point is that not almost like attempted murder or manslaughter, because you're giving yourself that unfair advantage? You may as well be loading your gloves though, right?
No, that's not. See, a lot of people make that analogy. If you were to use PEDs and not train at all, would you get any advantage?
I don't know. I
You
honestly don't
wouldn't.
know.
You wouldn't, because if that was the case, everyone and their mum would be on PEDs to look great and stuff. You
So
need to train.
I was told about the clomiphene thing a while ago,
Yeah.
that it actually did really change someone's physique. So someone, when a well-known case came to pass, someone called me up and said, oh, I was on clomiphene because he had mental health issues and his testosterone was well low and it needed to be higher. So he'd been given clomiphene to improve his mental health. And he said physically he changed significantly.
And he never did any training.
I think he was like an amateur boxing coach, so he would do pad works with the
Well,
kids and
you see,
stuff.
but that's my point. He still did some training. These drugs do not work if you don't train.
Right.
These drugs do not work if you don't train. So to make the comparison to loading gloves is inaccurate. Do you know what
So
I mean?
what about this? If everyone's on this stuff, the stuff that's naturally produced in the body, so the EPO, the testosterone stuff, does it not come down to who has the better gear then? And are we not then looking at like a drivers' championships of Formula One as who's got the better team?
No, no, because again, it's not about the gear per se. The gear allows you to train harder. It still comes down to your training and your nutrition. It still comes down to that.
Not
So,
not
so
who not who's got the better team or the better science or
well, but that too. But
okay.
then you just proved my argument about the level playing field because there's no such thing. So take the PEDs out of it. Some people have better equipment. Some people have better gyms. Some people have better coaches. Some people have you could this whole thing about level playing field is an absolute nonsense because there's no such thing. There is no such thing as a level playing field. At some level, at any level, to be honest with you, there's someone better than the other. There's no such. In fact, I could make the argument that PEDs actually more levels the playing field because that would be accessible to everyone. So you might not have as great genetics for your sport as the next man, but you might have a better genetic response to the drug than that man. Then that levels the playing field. This is what I'm saying. That again, people need to think critically of this, and this is why I mentioned about the drugs that your body naturally makes. Because if I said to you, "Okay, I'm going to take this artificial drug, body doesn't make it," I can see the argument of, "Well, that's not that's artificial." But if you've got a natural substance, you're like, and I make the analogy with testosterone and creatine because creatine is made in the body, testosterone is made in the body. They both have been proven to be safe. They're both, obviously in therapeutic doses, they both have been proven to be safe. So there's no reason, apart from one group of people have said that one is okay and one isn't. Do you see what I'm saying? So in that respect, this is why I always make this comparison, with those two.
I find this I find it all fascinating. I'm
Mm.
like and obviously the your take. I love you. I'm really interested by your take. I mean, one of the old school Philly boxing writers, Nigel Collins, says he's gone completely the other way and says just legalize everything now and just
See, again, I was of that mindset, but then when I read what Charlie Francis had to say in Speed Trap, when he said, "Look, these anti-doping measures are only leading to people doing more dangerous stuff."
The thing is though, Larry,
So
so let me ask you, but let me intervene here. If you're leveling that playing field, we'll go back to outliers. You're still going to have people trying to find an edge. If you're all just on EPO and testosterone, and what was the third one?
uh, a growth hormone.
So if someone's on all that, they'll be like, nah. If they're just on them, I'm going to take some of this stuff and get something else. And then
Yeah, then ban them. Then ban them.
okay, I see.
So that's what I'm saying. That's what Charlie Francis said.
But
So
if that,
Charlie
but if
Francis,
that's the mindset of the athlete, they're always going to be looking for an advantage, right? And then they'll be trying to find stuff that's non to
but you're
like
never
it's
gonna, yeah, but you're never gonna stop that. No matter what
yeah.
you do, you're never gonna stop that. So that I think can be put to one side because even if we said allow everything, I mean, people haven't even touched on this, but I know it goes on. There's gene doping now, and there's no test for that. You can change your genes with CRISPR and a couple of other techniques. You can actually change your genes now. There's no test for this. So there's always going to be ways to cheat and or so whatever you call cheating or whatever. It's never going to stop. It's never ever. It's just human nature. It's human nature. So I think making that making stuff that's naturally produced in the body okay, and then saying everything else is not okay. I think that's a good middle ground to have because you know then you're saying, okay, look, I think that's being fair. And then if you have any, because and that's another thing because then it's easier to even catch people if they're not gene doping, obviously, but that's expensive. So if you're not gene doping, if you're trying to use any other artificial substance, it's actually easier to catch you because your body doesn't make it. So it actually makes the anti-doping organizations more effective.
I am both amazed and terrified in equal measures.
and look, I'm not. Listen, I understand people who are not for doping. I get it. I'm not trying to say you should be for doping. I get it. No problem. I've got no problem with. But when they come up with the same nonsensical, oh, you're going to kill someone, it's going to take a death. Because I've spoken to lawyers, right, and they said, realistically speaking, if someone dies in a ring and the other person was found to be taking PEDs, they could not be done for manslaughter. Because again, as I said earlier, that would assume that no one's ever died in the ring. Can you die in the ring from taking punches? Of course you can. So how are you going to prove that it was these PEDs that made the difference in that person dying? You can't prove it. You can't prove it. Do you see what I'm saying? So all of this, that's why I said people got to start thinking critically.
So the only thing I counter with that, Larry, is obviously, but going back in the chat, when we were talking about knockout punches and how they can't improve with that. Well, if the PEDs have given them that knockout power, you could contend that, right? But I suppose at the same time, obviously my big part of my recent background is brain trauma and boxing. So obviously we'll never know what punch was caused by it, and obviously it could be an underlying brain issue from a sparring session or previous fights or higher mileage. We'll never know. I suppose there's never going to be any way of proving it at all, is there?
And look, let me just say this, because a lot of people say that, oh yeah, this, that, and the other about PEDs, you're going to hurt someone, you're going to kill someone, blah 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 blah. Let's all remember. Some people might remember, some people won't if you're not into MMA. But there was an MMA organization before the UFC bought it called Pride. I think you're familiar with Pride. Now, Pride, and I knew a few guys that fought in Pride. I've seen their contracts. They actually said they don't, because the Japanese love big freaky guys fighting. They want to see big freaky guys knocking each other out. They put in there that they will not be testing for any PEDs whatsoever. And there has been and Pride ran for quite a while. There's been no serious injuries in Pride. So I would argue that if you're allowing people to take PEDs, because also there's been some studies that certain PEDs, i.e. growth hormone, actually protect the brain. So, and the nervous system. So it could be argued that you're actually protecting yourself from injury from using these PEDs. So I think there just needs to be more critical thinking when it comes to this, not just this dogmatic, oh, ban them all, or ban everything, or this, that, and the other. And people slowly are starting to see that, because it's never going to end. It's not like, we saw the Balco Labs thing, for instance. Do you know, and this is based on my training as a pharmaceutical chemist, there are thousands of changes that you can make to the testosterone molecule to create a new anabolic steroid that's never been created before, just like the Balco Labs people did. It's not hard to do. And in fact, I would wager that a lot of athletes are on undetectable stuff still. I mean, when was Balco Labs? That was ages ago. Like, you think it hasn't been done since then? So again, the athletes are well ahead of the anti-doping organization, and it's when athletes mess up that they get caught. It's when they mess up that they get, because and you've got to think also that in particular with when it comes to boxing, people have only just started being caught because there's just a tiny bit of a step up in testing. There's only been a tiny bit of and everyone's getting caught left, right, and center. Imagine if there was the kind of tests that there are in, like, say, track and field. There'd be no boxers left. There'd be no boxers left. So, for me, things have just got to change. They've got to change. However you do it, it's got to change, but it's got to be a realistic change. And the way everyone's looking at this right now, the powers that be, it's just unrealistic. You know what I mean? It's unrealistic. And I think people have got to start bringing their mind to being more realistic, because as I've touched on so many things in this interview, and people should start to realize that. I mean, again, no one talks about gene doping, but that's out there. That's been out there for years. That's been out there since 2008, gene doping, and that's only gotten better and better and better. So there's no test for that, and there probably will never be a test for that because you're changing your actual genes. But that's how far people are willing to go. And so when you hear things like that, it's like, how do we combat this? Like, you can't. So you've got to make some changes where you're getting the best of both worlds. That's how it's got to be. I mean, listen, it's not the first time in history that when they did the I'm going on a completely different tangent, but when Britain did the Good Friday deal, you had to make some concessions. Yeah, you had to release terrorists. It happens all the time, right? Like you can't have everything your own way. You have to make concessions. It's just the way things work. If you want to get certain result, you've got to compromise. It's just the way.
Let me ask you this, because you come across as someone who's pretty bulletproof and quite hard in terms of, matter of fact. I would borderline saying unrepentant. I don't know. Is that I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be a good statement to make. Yeah.
So, but in terms of being busted, and was it similar to going to jail, like in terms of being caught, or like, and in terms of like your mental health, and I'm not using mental health as a cop out, but obviously in terms of how you're seen and perceived and that perception, and also like there is a different thing in boxing, right? If you get popped in boxing, people do like just re-emerge and they start fighting, and we touched on earlier, they get a license elsewhere. In track and field, look at Ben Johnson now with 40 years on, and he's still a dirty word. Like, in boxing, guys are popping now and they're getting in the Hall of Fame. Like it's a very different set of parameters. But in terms of you, and in that, and I've got my question here: is being caught similar to that, like being caught and going to prison? Or is it just two completely different things? The prison thing was
two completely different things. My liberty wasn't taken from me. It wasn't even comparable. Not even comparable. For me, being busted was just like, shit. Oh well,
what they're gonna do, sort of thing as well. Like, because what are you gonna do?
Right. You know what I mean? So just go find something else to do. But that's my mind. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's other people have got a different mindset to it, but for me, it's there was always a risk. You always know that risk is there, and it didn't. Obviously, it bothers you, but because again, like I said, you knew that everyone else is at it, and they're making me the scapegoat. But at the same time, that's why I came out with the rhetoric that I did, and I still do today, because I know and I've been proven right. I mean, a lot of people have now messaged me and said every time someone pops that, yeah, Larry was right. Everyone is at it, and that's why I say I take some comfort in that sometimes and get some satisfaction in that. But at the same time, do I need that to validate me at all? No, because I don't really care. Because my like I said, I've always said it from day one. My main aim in boxing was to make a living for myself and my family. And if I never, so that part of it was the part that sucked, but you move on. I mean, if I can do 5 years behind the door and get out and say, like, I'm moving on and get on with my life in a positive manner, then, to be honest, this pales in comparison,
So what's the dream gig acting wise? You've done the Marvel thing, but is it to get a really significant role in something like that?
Yeah, I would like that Luke Cage role. Have you seen Luke Cage on Netflix?
Yeah, I have. Yes, yeah.
That I remember when that came on, and so I got so many calls saying, Larry, that should have been you. Like the goatee, the size, that should have been you. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that was one of the superheroes that I loved growing up. And I would love to have played him. And the fact that now that the rights have gone back to Marvel means that they'll be looking at some point to make a film with, you know, so I want in on that. That'll definitely be the dream role.
With a London slant, that'd be great. That.
Oh no! I can do an American accent. In fact, I've got I can't say what it is, but I've got all part of the acting training. But I've got something coming out soon that I'm doing an American accent in on TV. So yeah.
I would be that guy saying, "Oh, talk to me in American," but what sort of American are you? What sort? West Coast?
They call it General American, so it could be said to be West Coast. It can be like Midwest and yeah,
Because the
General American.
dialects are quite specific, aren't they? With the South and New York and
Yeah,
Boston,
yeah,
like you can pick them
exactly.
out if you've been over there enough.
Yeah, so you got your General American, which is like Midwest, West Coast. Then you've got your, like you said, your New York, your New Jersey accents. You got your Southern accent. Yeah, yeah.
How many have you got? Just the one generic at the minute?
And yeah, I just got the generic one. I can do the Southern, but it won't be consistent. New York won't be consistent either. But the general one, and that's to be honest, that's the one that most casting directors are asking for from actors, especially actors from Britain. So yeah.
We talked about some of your athletic heroes. Do you have acting heroes as well, or people that you study and people that you
Oh
really?
yeah. Without a doubt.
Who would be your sort of 2 or 3 if you watched everything of it? Denzel, yeah.
Denzel, Joe Pesci, yeah, Robert De Niro, Wesley Snipes. Yeah.
What a blend! What a blend! I'd love to see you doing a Joe Pesci impression. That would be priceless. Still. Larry, look, I don't know what I was expecting. Obviously, we spoke a lot back, or we spoke a few times back in the day, and I always remember our conversations as you not being the average bear, as it were. So in the sense that you're definitely not the stereotype of someone who's been to prison, had a toughish upbringing, albeit with good parents who were trying to keep you on the right path, and boxing and all the rest of it. Like our conversations did stay with me, and I'm really pleased we've been able to reconnect. And I wish you well
yeah.
moving forwards as well with the acting stuff. And I would recommend anyone who's not seen your IMDb to definitely go over and check it out because there is some. I was blown away. Went from a whole plethora of stuff. It was great. It was great to watch.
I appreciate it. I really do. Really do.
No, thank you
Yeah.
very much for the time, Larry. I really appreciate this. It's been
No,
great.
you're most welcome. You're most
I'm
welcome.
grateful. I'm grateful. Keep in touch, mate.
Will do, man. You take care.
All the best. Bye bye.
Bye.